by the time we got home, got voted off. So, do you get it, Norm? Okay. Actually, Ken was first, not me. So there you go. Let's go. I hope you remember a little bit of what's said today, because I know that some of the things and some of the speakers that you have the rest of the day will be great, and I hope that we can build upon each other. When I was in Bible college, I read a lot of books, had a lot of opportunity to be involved in a lot of discussion that I wasn't involved in when I was in high school, etc. I went to a Bible college called Emmaus Bible College down in it's called Dubuque, Iowa. It's from a Brethren background. I don't know if you guys know of that or not. You start actually in Oak Park, and my last year we moved to Dubuque, Iowa. So I'm a Brethren boy at heart, and that's where I come from. Now, one of the interesting things is that a lot of what I read was not by this guy, Francis Schaeffer, but probably the stuff that I did read that affected me most at that time, and even to this day, is by Francis Schaeffer. And Francis Schaeffer died in 1984 or so. But what's interesting about Francis Schaeffer is that probably the majority of really what made his greatest impact was probably after he turned 50. But yet he would come up with quotes such as this, and I thought I'd start with this. Each generation of the church in each setting has the responsibility of communicating the gospel in understandable terms, considering the language and the thought forms of each setting. Now, when that was written, likely in about the 1970s, that was something that you'd really have to go, oh, I need to understand the context of what we're talking about here. For the sake of time, and this is where we're going with this, is, Ken, I'm actually totally into making sure I'm on time. I'm going to tell you a little bit personal background and background info. I'm going to do that really, really fast. I'm going to tell you what I've learned in over 30 years of ministry. I'm going to give you a little touch on a study called Hemorrhaging Faith. I'm hoping that actually will come up with a few other speakers throughout the day. A bit of a biblical response. I'd like to be open for about at least 5 to 10 minutes of questions if you have that. And then if we get through that, I have some final comments. And even if we don't, then I'm good. Okay? So very aware of making sure that from a conference perspective that we don't go over time. Who am I? Very, very briefly, this is it. I've a Bachelor of Science degree with a major in Bible. Strange degree, but I've got it. Can't tell you, but it's through Emmaus Bible College down the States. Basically, it's this. I went to Bible college for 3 years. They moved to Dubuque, Iowa. It's a satellite campus for the University of Iowa, and I was able to take all science courses to get my degree at the end. So I have this really weird degree, but I've got a Bachelor of Science with a major in Bible. And then, after I got married, my first few years of when we got married, my wife was working at Ontario Bible College at the time, and you could actually go to school for free if you were a spouse. So we lived on $14,000 and went to school for 2 years, and I have my master's in theological studies with a major in youth ministry. From a very quick snapshot, I was a youth pastor. I cut my teeth in youth ministry in Park Bible Church. It's now called Compass Point Bible Church in Burlington, but I was a youth pastor there for 5 years. Maybe you know Ron Gannett. I worked under him for 5 years. And if you know Ron quite well, 5 years is like 15 years to most people under Ron, but that's another story. Then I co-founded, as Ken already said, the Canadian Youth Network, and I know some of you from that context, and that was 17 years that I did that. And only last year I stepped down and then started to work for the Meeting House. I also don't teach currently at Heritage Bible College. For 7 years I taught youth ministry there. Marv Brubaker asked me to join that team, and then stepped down from that actually in the last year when I was started with Meeting House, and now I'm still teaching youth ministry at Emmanuel Bible College, and I'm in my 5th year this year. And I'm trying hard to step out of that, but it just won't work. I don't know why, but we won't work. Now, what I find funny about that is that even though that's a little bit about my background, this is really what's taught me ministry, and that is completely my family. And those of you who know me, you know that this is my family, and I will just go through. I've got Mike and Olivia are together there. Olivia is married to Mike Bronson. Mike was part of Emmaus Church in Burlington. Your Emmaus Church in Burlington. Is Kip here? Okay. Is he part of your group? Yeah. So part of they are actually stopped off. They've moved out of Emmaus now, and they're actually planting a church in Binbrook in this next year. They've just had a new baby, Noah, so he's just joined our team too. So Eliza, Eli, my wife and I, and then little baby Noah. Now what's funny is I'm still teaching youth ministry, and now I'm a grandfather, right? And so there's something I find very amusing about that, but also like not amusing about it as well. And I think that part of that is I'm actually trying to get out of that job. So if any of you want to teach youth ministry at Emmanuel, talk to me, and we'll try and make that work. This is really where the core of what we're talking about is. If I've been in ministry 30 years, the one thing I've learned in a nutshell is you got to keep things simple. Keep things simple, simple, simple. Good, I've got some amens. This is wonderful. And maybe that's in my way of saying, as I get older, how do you just keep things more simple? A few years ago, it's 2012, have you ever heard of this Hemorrhaging Faith Report? I'm hoping that a few of you have. I'm hoping actually that quite a few of you have. Come back to it because still when I'm in discussions with a lot of church leaders, there's still some of us that haven't realized that we actually have this amazing resource at our disposal. Now, 2012 is 4 years ago. Now, 4 years is actually a long time ago when we're talking about the way that our current culture is changing. But this is the best we have, and I think it still is an amazing resource for us to tap into. So, if you are not familiar with hemorrhaging faith is a study, and the study is, and you got to listen to this, it's a study, and it started out to be 18 to 24, 26-year-olds of youth and young adults that had been going to church and have been involved in youth ministry in Canada, and it's kind of like a where are they now? Do you get that? So these are students that have grown up in our youth ministries, and where are they now? The interesting part is, as this study was being done, they were realizing that we actually can't stop at mid-20s. We actually need to go higher. The study actually then became an 18 to 32-year-old study, 18 to 32. So the same thing is, students that are involved in our youth ministry, where are they now? Now, this was launched in 2012. And if you still want to take a look, you can actually look. If you want to go to Faith Today online, you can get a snapshot, and it's a little bit of what I'm going to talk about today, a snapshot of what the study was about, or the actual Hemorrhaging Faith study still is available for you to download or purchase. It's about 120 pages. I actually have read it. It's not my style of stuff to read, but on the other hand, if some of you are totally into this type of information, it's very, very important. So, hemorrhaging faith, why and when Canadian young adults are leaving and staying and returning in the church. And I will say one thing, if we've all been ministry long enough, we've read a lot of books from our American friends, which are wonderful. The problem is we have to put them through filters that are Canadian filters to get there. You do not need to do that with what we're about to talk about today. Lots of things in it. I'm probably going to talk about one major stat that I think is alarming for us to talk about today. If we have time after questions, I have something else, but if we don't, then that's fine. One of the things that came out of the study is that as these young people were going through and have come out of our youth ministries and our church involvement, the question really was, how do we understand where they're at in terms of their faith journey now? So these are some of the spiritual types that they talked about, and these are some of the titles that they called them. And the four titles are engagers, fence-sitters, wanderers, and rejectors. So engagers, fence-sitters, wanderer, and rejectors. Again, remember, we're talking about young people that have gone through our church ministries, right? That where are they now? Engagers. We found out that about 23% were still calling themselves engagers. That means that as they went through the church, they still felt as if there was a place for them. They still felt as if the church is a place where it fully accepts who I am and where I can best fit. Fence-sitters. Fence-sitters is interesting. Now, fence-sitters is an interesting word in itself because, quite frankly, us as Canadians are known worldwide for being a bit of fence-sitters. That is, we're not quite here, we're not quite there. We kind of take the middle position on a lot of things. Well, fence-sitters is interesting when you talk about the spiritual types because fence-sitters was kind of that title of people, of young people that said, well, I appreciate where I came from in the church, but I'm not sure I fully believe everything that I had been taught, but I still respect all of those people. And if they want to believe that, that's fine. I'm still not sure where I will be. Fence-sitters are typically the ones that you will find will go to church a few times a year. They might go to church less than once a month, but yet they will not be fully engaged. They will not be saying, I want to participate in the life of the church. Go to wanderers. Wanderers is an interesting category because wanderers have gone through all of this church ministry, but yet they are not at the point of actually saying, I am a fence sitter. I'm actually just going to, if I do go to church, I probably will go to church maybe with my family when they need me to go. That would be if they need me to go to a baptism, right? Or a baby dedication. For sure, Christmas and Easter and things like that. Interestingly about wanderers have actually come to a place in their own faith journey where they've actually said, I'm not sure if all of this stuff I've been taught is actually true. I'm actually not sure of that. And they tend to take a bit more of a perspective when they're with other people, that they say, hey, if you have a belief system of being Muslim, or if you have a belief system of being atheist, or whatever your belief system is, that's fine for you. What's fine for me is for me. What's fine for you is for you. They're actually a very frustrating group, right, to talk to. Rejectors are 15%. Now remember, we're talking again, rejectors. These have been through our church system, part of our youth ministry, even grown up in the church, but they're saying, no, I do not want to be a part of faith anymore. Now, what's interestingly about that is, and I do not have time to go through this whole thing, but out of that 15%, the majority are men, boys, males. They tend to take a more strong approach to that area, that this actually is not for me and I'm completely rejecting it. Now, I will tell you a story is that I go through this every year when I teach my intro to youth ministry classes of all my schools. When I was in Heritage one of the years and we were going through this, I actually said to the students in my class, remember, these are now Bible college students. They chose to go to Bible college, and they are hoping to get into ministry. I said to them, I don't do it anymore. I said to them, how many of you would consider yourselves engagers? Put up your hands. Now, would you not think that everybody would be in that category? I would say, honestly, maybe in a class of 22, 23, maybe 3 people put their hands up. Then you say, how many are in the category of fence sitters? Pretty much the majority. How many wanderers? No wanderers, right, rejectors. What was interesting about that was, for me, is that by the way, I love honesty and authenticity. That's what I love about this generation, is you get the real deal. So this one young guy comes up to me at the end of class, and he said to me, John, to be perfectly honest with you, if I were to look at that chart, I'm actually a fence sitter, but I'm heading towards being a wanderer. Like I'm not pointing my direction in terms of engagers. I'm actually pointing the opposite direction. And I think this is my last kick at the can of this spiritual stuff. Now, isn't that interesting? And I think it's very important that we recognize is that as we're having a discussion and we're trying to open doors, is your theme, is that when we look at stats like this from 2012, and I would odds on say that in the last 4 years, probably those stats are getting lower, but the direction of the arrow isn't going towards engagers. It's actually going the opposite direction. And this is the reality of who we are in the Canadian context and what we're doing in ministry. Now, I am not here to say to you that this is all bad news, because I think what's actually occurring is, and we're going to get into this a little bit, is that we're finding that some that are engagers are really engagers. And they want to make a real difference. Okay, so let's keep going here. Where is my clock here, Ken, by the way? Okay, so there it is. Being simple. If there's anything that we can be so simple with in terms of those of us that are in ministry together, this is our marching orders, is it not? And that is the Great Commission. So let's read it, and I hope that it does become a great launching pad for everything that we do today. Matthew 28:16-20. Then the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Let's not stay there, but love that. But some doubted. Then Jesus came to them and said, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age. This is our job. This is our role. This should be the most simple thing that we'd say and do. You need to be a disciple and to make other disciples. To me, that is at the end of the day, the most simple way of explaining what our function is as Christians and as leaders. What in the world is a disciple? That could be a theme for your entire conference next year. I'm going to go very quickly and tell you this, though. Every time we look, and I believe we just need to understand the most simplest form, that it's not rocket science. I have this little guy named Noah came into our lives 4 months ago, and he is growing unbelievably. Now, what's interestingly enough is that my wife loves holding him because he's like a newborn baby still holding him. I cannot wait till he starts walking. So that's a whole other story. But the amazing thing about it is, right before our eyes, we are seeing this young little guy grow. Growth is essential for any type of human development. We go from early childhood, I don't know if you can see this or not, right? We go from infancy to early childhood to early teens to young adulthood to late adulthood. Guys, this is what happens. This is what happens. You know? And now that I am like this grandparent, by the way, I pushed away from that whole idea of grandparent like about 6 months ago. Now I so embrace it. It is not funny, but that's a whole other story. Okay. But I'm recognizing that part of life is this. This is how life works. Life works in terms of each stage brings with it some sort of different skill development. I mean, you go from an infant that is totally dependent on mom to the point where now this actually little guy started to grab things, put it in his mouth. At a certain point, he will start to crawl. At a certain point, he will walk. Then he will then be crawling up our shelves, right? Okay? Then we will have to pull him off the shelves. I mean, this is what happens. And then we go through school, and then we go through in our teenage. We are always learning skills and development. There's always an expectation of what that is. But do we do the same thing when it comes to our spiritual growth and being a disciple? Remember what the objective today is? Keep things simple. Spiritual development also assumes the growth that we need to process as a believer. I mean, spiritual birth happens, right? There's birth to our spiritual lives. And we see that in being born again in John chapter 3. Spiritual infancy implies that there will be growth to a higher or greater level of maturity. Nicodemus, in the story of Nicodemus, John 3:3-7, Jesus replied, I tell you the truth, unless you are what? Born again, you cannot see the kingdom of God. What do you mean? Exclaimed Nicodemus. How can an old man go back into his mother's womb to be born again? Jesus replied, I assure you, no one can enter the kingdom of God without being born of water and the Spirit. Humans can reproduce only human life, but the Holy Spirit gives birth to spiritual life. Don't be surprised when I say you must be born again. I grew up in a perspective and a background where being born again was pretty important. But I can't remember talking beyond that a lot. And I'm not trying to put blame on that, but I'm saying to you, it's more than being born again. 1 Peter 2:2, like newborn babies, you must crave spiritual milk, right? There's a nurturing that happens so that you will grow to a full experience of salvation. 1 Corinthians 3:2, I had to feed you with milk, not with solid food. Hebrews 5:12, you have been believers so long, now you ought to be teaching others. Instead, you need someone to teach you again the basic things about God's word. Why? Because you are like babies who need milk and cannot eat solid food. Let's have some fun. Do we have time? Sure we do. Okay. I'm a youth guy at heart, sorry. In the 1900s, if we were to pick on culture and say the 1900s, 1970s, and then where we're at today, I hope we can get through this fairly quickly. Music, fashion, entertainment, technology. You guys with me on this? If you're to pick the first three songs, and Google it if you want, but I think it's actually fairly accurate, you'd say Yankee Doodle Dandy, America the Beautiful, and Danny Boy probably were your top three songs. You get into fashion, it'd be tailored clothes, dresses and corsets. Entertainment, if you call it that, would be reading books. And likely Wizard of Oz would be your big book, and then radio was only starting. What moved culture forward the most in the early 1900s was the motor vehicle. Okay, you guys get that? This is the quick version, okay? In the 1970s, quickly, and you can do this. What do you think the third most popular song was in the 1970s? Too late. Hotel California. The second, what's that? No, close, sort of. Do you play a guitar when you were young? Everybody knew this song. It's called Stairway to Heaven. There you go. Okay. By the way, you can kick yourself later. Then the number one song they say of the 1970s probably was considered the longest song of the day for a long time. Actually, American Pie, I heard that came from. Fashion would have been disco fashion. That would be mini skirts and bell bottoms. You know what? I'm going to slow down here. Okay, entertainment would have been, I believe, TV. Anybody know the number one TV of the 1970s? I'm looking at the hair here, and I'm thinking you guys should know this. Okay, Leave It to Beaver? No, but okay. Anybody else? Yes. All in the Family. If there was a number one movie of the day in the 1970s, think about this. What do you think it would be? Raiders of the Lost Ark. No, it wasn't Star Wars. Pardon? Not Love Story. Oh, I love that movie, Godfather. No, not Godfather. Actually, it has to do with fashion. It's called Saturday Night Fever. And then probably the number one form of entertainment, though, was radio, right? It would be radio. Any idea of the technology that moved that time forward the most? No, not what? No. Actually, it would be VHS and VCRs. And if you think about it long enough, you go, whoa, it actually makes a huge difference. Now, who knows? Okay, now this is, didn't have enough time to find out the number 1, 2, and 3 song like last night, because this is how quickly it changes. But in early January, I did this presentation. So here you go. You're going to get to listen to it. David, you guys got that? Okay, listen to this and you tell me the song. And if you are over 30 and know this, bonus. You get to put a card in.
Open up the champagne, pop. It's my house, come on, turn it up.
Nobody know this?
On the door and the night begins.
Who is this?
'Cause we've done this before.
Okay, I can't. My House by Florida. Florida? How do you say? Florida. That's right. He's Canadian, right? Right? He's from Canada. And David, stay in here. We might need you. This is a tough group. Okay. Number 2 song was, now this is a little bit, no, it's coming. There we go. Do you know this song? David. By 21 Pilots. Now, all of you should know the number 1 song here. It's on now.
All the times that you rain on my parade, and all the clubs you get in using my name.
Okay, we don't have enough time, but it's called Love Yourself. Okay, there you go. When we talk about fashion, it's recycling of the 90s or anything goes, that's right? It's kind of where we are these days. Got to go through this kind of quick. TV, Big Bang Theory. What do you think the number 1 movie of last year was? Too late. Star Wars. Interestingly enough, the number 1, I just have to put this up, actually the number 1 form of entertainment above anything actually is video games. And we could actually talk about this for a long time. And the number 1 is called League of Legends. You're talking about over $165 billion, right, that's in this industry. But when we kind of come across and say, what is the number, how do you find out what the number 1 song of last year? They do it by this. The most downloaded song of 2015 was? Oh, guys, you should be dancing. It's actually Uptown Funk by Bruno Mars. And we believe that probably as technology moves forward, mobile devices are important. Okay. Now, I've just shown you in a very, very quick glimpse how society's changed since the 1900s to the 1970s. What's interesting about the 1970s is the 1970s is when, in North America, youth ministry started. So it's very, very important you understand that. I want to get through this next. This is actually like super important, and I hope this sticks with you. It's a guy named Granville Stanley Hall in 1904. He is the person who actually developed he's the one who wrote the definition of what adolescence is. The definition that he said is this: it's the period of life between puberty and a, quote, culture's expectation of adult-like engagement in culture at large, becoming a fully contributing member of society. This definition was written in 1904. It is still used today as the definition of adolescence. Very important. The definition that was written in 1904 is still the definition that is used today. A culture's expectation of adult-like engagement in the culture at large. That is becoming a fully contributing member of society. I'm going to pick on the 1900s, the 1970s, and where we're at in this thing it's called prolonged adolescence. And this actually taps into a lot of the hemorrhaging phase study. 3 things: puberty, end of adolescence, and then the actual years. When we're looking at, in the 1900s, puberty is that time, basically. Do we all know what puberty is? Okay, like I don't want. Okay, I'm a youth ministry teacher, so I'm really pretty. I'm bold with this. Bottom line of it is, okay, boys start growing hair, girls start growing hair, boys get super smelly. Okay, we understand, right, with puberty. Puberty is kind of that time when we've always thought is the time from childhood to beginning of being an adult. What's interesting is that when you look at the definition that Granville Stanley Hall has said, he says it's the beginning of when do you stop being an adolescent? It's when you when you have gone through puberty, and then when the culture expects you to be engaged in society. You guys get that? So we need to understand these days, when is it starting? In the 1900s, puberty was starting at 14 and a half years old, and the end of adolescence, that culture's expectation of your engagement, was about 16 years old. That is that if you were, by the way, doing youth ministry in those days, you have 18 months to do it. In the 1970s, that is when youth ministry started being used in our churches the way that we are doing it today. Puberty was 13 years old, and the end of adolescence was about 18 years old. Now, that makes sense, because a lot of us grew up on, you're 18 years old, you should know better. You're 18 years old, you're an adult, right? Try doing that today. When do you think puberty's starting? 10 and a half to 11 years old is when puberty is starting. The problem is that we're still not sure when the end of adolescence is. That's 20 to 25 years old. That's 10 to 15 years. By the way, now you know why we're struggling in our churches with youth ministry, and we also understand why when a lot of people who've gone through our youth ministry programs or whatever ministries have actually come out the other end, and we see the stats like we see in Hemorrhaging Faith. That just one small part of it is this thing that society has on us right now called prolonged adolescence. Do you guys get that? I hope that what you see in that is a glimpse. So now what's happening is that I find every year when I'm teaching this to my youth ministry students, they feel like they're younger and younger. It's not just because I'm getting older, but truly it is they're younger and younger. And I'm thinking, like, it's just unbelievable, right? That you're actually now sitting and you're going, oh my goodness, like how much our culture has completely changed in this thing that's called prolonged adolescence. I'm just going to switch gears a little bit and give you a little bit of a perspective and then a biblical connection. I'm going to open up for questions, and maybe we'll have time for some other things. Do you guys remember Haiti? Do you remember like the earthquake in Haiti? That's now in 2010. It feels like yesterday, 6 years ago. That earthquake was unbelievable devastation, and it was a 7.0 magnitude from a perspective of how much damage or what the strength of that earthquake, right? Did I say hurricane? I mean, earthquake happened. But maybe what we don't remember is about a month later, there was also another earthquake in Chile. And the amazing part about it is that the magnitude was much higher, 8.8 magnitude. But it did not cause the devastation. Let me read you a passage. Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 7. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down and the streams rose and the winds blew and beat against that house, yet it did not fall because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the wind blew and beat against that house, and yet it fell with a crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as teachers of the law. I think in the most simplest form as we possibly can say, that right through this song that I sung in Sunday school for years and years and years is an amazing truth that maybe as all of these young people have actually been going through our ministry, we've been building a foundation of sand. Do you guys get that? So what's our open door, right? These people need a foundation of rock. They need it deeply in their own discipling journey. And the amazing part about it is the storms come. I don't care if you're on sand or rock, the storms are coming. 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years ago, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. It's what changed our life completely. Love Canadian Youth Network, love what we were doing for 17 years. But as we were going through that journey, recognized that nothing will be the same again. So we put on our altar the job, our house, just everything. Now, she's doing great 2 years later. I want you to say that. By the way, that's why 25th anniversary is now 25, 26, and 27 got piled in. It's because we couldn't do it back then. But what that led to was the storms don't go around us just because we're doing great ministry. But I can honestly tell you that because of the discipling journey that we've had and that our journey was always embedded in what God would have for us is about being rock and being that place where we're fully dependent on him. It completely changed, right? That journey that we were in ourselves. So why I say this is because I think that we maybe in our leadership need to just rethink things a little bit to say, how are we as we are ministering to younger generations, to ourselves first, to minister to other generations, are we doing and creating sand foundations or rock? Is that simple enough? Good. Here's my open for questions. We're good. So I'm at 9:48. Not bad, huh? I do have a few extra words if you give me time, though, but I'll leave it for now. Does anybody have any questions? I am actually super uncomfortable doing this. I am more comfortable with Q&A or just in a teaching session or even interrupting me.
So what are the practical aspects of a youth ministry or any ministry laying that solid foundation?
I think that what we need to do is have the goal of everything we do is making disciples. And I think part of making disciples is being very intentional about that, Ken. I'm going to repeat myself to those who have been involved in youth ministry with me for many years. We need to simplify what it is to be disciple. Now, I think you need to figure that out on your own, but I think a lot of pastors don't understand what that means simply, so the youth pastor, youth worker doesn't know what they mean as well. I will say what I believe. I think we need to do something that says, am I number one? 4 things. Am I number one saying in my ministry, how can I bring people to Christ? Right? Now, when we say that, usually we're saying about I'm delivering the message all the time. When we're actually saying in our ministry that I want to bring people to Christ, you call it evangelism, we call it whatever you want to say that part of that is that we're always now working with people outside the church. Do you guys get that? Okay. So, in terms of youth ministry, I want to make sure I understand that if I'm working with people outside the church, I want my kids in my youth ministry always to be thinking about their friends. How? Not just to bring them along, but how do I represent God outside of my group? And odds are, there's a it's a 3-letter word that you need to make sure you always have called fun. So why I say that is that I actually have no problem with just having some groups that are completely fun, but are you bringing your friends, right? Number 2 is with the expectation that they meet Jesus. We want to share the message. They meet Jesus. How are they, number 2, growing in their faith journey? Are they growing? Do I see growth happening at all? Is that through Bible studies, through one-on-one, whatever that might be? This is number 2 would be growth. Number 3 would be serving. It's not just all about me. It's about how I am affecting other people. And it's also sometimes, what's interesting is that back in the day when I was starting in youth ministry, all of your invitation events where you bring your friends with all the fun stuff. These days, you can get friends to come to serving events, like serving, like you get into serving. And then the 4th thing I would say would be multiplication, is that it's not all about just the fact that it stops. It's like, am I someone that's a disciple that will be willing to, right, be a multiplier? So, quick on that one, Ken, and then if you have another question. How many of you like watermelon? Okay. How many of you do you guys know the difference between seedless watermelon and seeded watermelon? Seedless watermelon? Pugh. But that's what we're creating. Seed, Genesis 1. You need to be seed bearing. That is, we need to be multipliers. But what are we creating? We're creating a bunch of us that are just seedless watermelon in terms of fruit in our discipling journey. And so why I say that is because that's kind of, I think, what we're missing in a nutshell. There you go. Yeah, go ahead.
Very quickly,
Yeah.
2016, 10.5 to 25 is adolescence. I would expect that the reason of that extension is that people don't have to grow up.
Yeah.
We live in a society, you don't have to be responsible.
Yep.
Right? And I would think that, 1900s, 14 to 16, you have to grow up real quick.
Yep.
Hi, how are you? Get a job. This is what you have to do.
Yep.
So how do you combat that 10.5? I would extend that 25 to 40-year-olds. I really would.
I know.
So,
When there's a question you're asked and there's no answer, but on the other hand there is. So here's the deal. How do you combat culture? I think you just need to realize this is the culture that we have working around us. I think it also now needs to occur within our church settings. I think we can, though, say to a young person in that age group, how can we come alongside them better? Try not lumping them completely into culture, but say there's a 25-year-old that maybe we can actually work alongside with. That's the best way I can say. Now, the reason why I'm saying that is because I think that too many of us have our 35-year-old kids living in our basement still. Oh, sorry. But how do you combat that? Because part of that's the culture that we're in, and that's where we're at as well. I think part of it is, how do we help them? Now, do you know what? As now a parent of kids who are in their 20s now, and I'm trying to get them out my door, at a certain point, I stop actually talking to them and saying, Lord, please bring someone in their life that they'll actually listen to outside of me. Because part of it is I'm saying, sometimes just as a parent, that's what you're at. You have a follow-up. Sorry, go ahead.
well, just as an example, I work in mental health and addiction.
Yeah, okay.
I had a 75-year-old woman call me yesterday that was at the beer store buying beer for her daughter,
Yeah.
who is an alcoholic, and said, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah.
I asked, how old is your daughter? She said 46.
Yeah. Yep. But this is the world we live in. Okay. I don't know what else to say. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
John, I would just, I'm one of those parents who's had those kids come home again,
Okay, yeah.
then leave,
Yeah.
then come home
Yeah,
again,
Yeah. Okay.
then leave, then come home again.
Do you want me to pray for you?
No,
okay,
no.
Okay.
They're gone now.
Okay.
They're gone now.
Oh, they are? Okay.
One's 31, one's 28. But through this there's a silver lining in that you as a parent have more opportunity then to witness to your own kids.
Sure, absolutely. Yep.
And you as a parent have an opportunity to also demonstrate a lot more of your faith and your support to them, and that unconditional love, that will be tested, but you get that opportunity. So I think there will be a residual in them
Okay.
that, as you say, when the storms come,
Absolutely. Yeah.
that then it will resonate, and they'll go back to that grounding and that example and that blessing. I'm praying that's the case. And so far, one has hit one of those kinds of storms, and I've seen a distinct change in his character so far. So it's I'm still watching this, quite fascinated by it as well.
Good. Thank you. Anybody else? Chris.
Hey, John, could you make a quick comment on when you talk about wanderers, fence sitters, even the engagers, of what it would be to open a door to some of the youth within your youth ministry, to have them involved? What is it to open a door to give them some of those responsibilities or opportunities?
Okay, I would say to you that engagers, there's two parts of we need to recognize with engagers. One is sometimes it's just the personality of the person. Actually, they're just a very engaged personality, and a lot of those people actually aren't as connected in their faith journey as we might think they are, but they're still very engaged in our church, okay? That's just their personality. I think that what happens with fence sitters are looking for opportunities. That is, can I not just work the soundboard? Would you allow me actually to be in front of people? Would you, like, we're holding back from giving a lot of opportunities that we possibly should be giving people. When it gets to wanderers, things like that, you're in a whole different category. Yeah, wanderers is, quite frankly, honestly, the most frustrating group out of that group. When we hear about looking at that group, rejectors are actually, interestingly enough, the ones when they have a real God encounter somewhere miraculously, they go from rejectors to engagers. They don't go through the mix. They go from a rejected God to, whoa, I'm fully in, I'm in, and I don't care what you say. In fact, if you get a rejector that's an engager, get them in their testimony quickly. So, but give opportunities. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
John, I just had a question about, we've had several generations of children growing up in not a home that church was even mentioned or God was never even thought about. What sort of statistics does it show up in your youth group? Like how many believers to non-believers would you have? Is there a...
I wouldn't even know that.
You wouldn't even know that? Okay.
No.
I was just interested to know.
I will say this, that more engagers are from non-church backgrounds where they've come out of homes that haven't necessarily been homes where they've been in any tradition, where they have had an encounter with God that's real, and they're an engager. So why I say that is that actually challenges us within families. Sorry, we got to go real fast.
I just, and also I know that over the years there's always been, it's shown that if you don't get the youth when they're young, that's your best chance. Is that still the...
I would say, of course. Of course. Okay. And I'd also say to you that if we have camp experiences or mission experiences, that's also what Hemorrhaging Faith says, that they're likely to stay engaged longer. Like, camp is super important, and we have a gift to us in Ontario. Do you have a question? Sorry. You can talk to me later, too.
Just wondering if you have any ideas for how we can help engage parents to help build that foundation on the rock.
Okay, can you hold 1 sec? Do you have another question? Because I'm actually going to... Okay, can you ask me later? Because I have 2 minutes, and this is going to answer your question. The other thing that Hemorrhaging Faith taught us is a ton of stuff, okay? But if there's anything that jumped out at us is these things called these fourth barriers and drivers. This is like a coin. These same things drive young people towards their faith, but they drive people away from their faith. The number one thing is parents. So here, I'm going to say this real fast, and I'll be done. Parents, God, community, teaching. So you understand, it's like flipping a coin. Boom. One side, these four things drive young people towards their faith journey, that is strengthen their faith. Those same four things can drive them the opposite direction. Parents are the number one by far. By far. If you are running youth ministries and your parents and people in your youth ministries are thinking that when they drop their kids off, like they drop them off to soccer or karate or whatever, your kids become that much better disciples, okay, that's like not going to happen, okay? Youth ministry is designed to come alongside of the parents. Do you guys understand that? Parents have the number one responsibility to be disciplers of their kids. What that means is us as churches need to take more responsibility with parents. Do you hear what we're saying? Now, I'm even willing to say to you with 1 minute, Ken, sorry. As now the lead pastor of my site in Burlington, my youth ministry people came and talked to me. I had a lunch with them, and they talked to me about some frustrations, and I realized their frustrations are from the parents. So guess what? One of my goals this fall is to put myself in their position and go, John, your role as lead pastor of this church is to work with parents. It's really important. Now, I don't know where it's going to go. I'm hoping it's going to go well. But what I'm kind of saying to you, coming back to, is we as churches need to work more with parents and then help youth ministries work with the youth and then work together in that. God. So that is parents. Engage or disengage. God. How in the world can God be an obstacle? Well, some people come and say, well, he never answered my prayers. Or there's nothing happening. So all of a sudden it becomes... But the amazing part about it is that young people will still young adults will still stay in community if the community is alive or stagnant or not judgmental. And they'll actually say this, is that, whoa, I will actually still be involved in this, even though God hasn't affected me through anything, say, miraculous, but God has affected somebody else. They've answered their prayer. I will still stay with this. And then the last one is teaching, and this might be important for all of you, is that a huge barrier is the way we're teaching. Is that a lot of teaching these days comes to young people being extremely restrictive. Not empowering, but restrictive. That is, we're talking down. We're not being actually very intelligent with what we say. And we're actually not looking like we're even understanding culture at all. That does not mean when we teach, we need to say that what culture is doing is right, but are we being stimulating enough to say we understand culture and as we speak? And that doesn't matter what perspective we're talking about on those things. It's 10:01, I'm done, okay? So I was done. Thank you.
Can you grab your laptop? Wasn't that awesome? Praise God. Boy, we need to hear more. Thank you. So, thank you so much, John. That was good. I'm here to just say that we're moving into our break now, and we have to be back at 10:30 sharp. There'll be a flashing of the lights to let you know. There's free coffee and water out in the foyer, and there's a nice little area outside you can sit to. And there also are specialty coffees with a little bit of a cost to them, though, but they're specialty coffees, right? And also, we want to let you know about the new initiative that we've started this year, in that we've started a prayer room to be available to you to come down there, because it says in James 5, is anyone among you suffering? Let him pray. Is anyone cheerful? Let him sing psalms. Is anyone among you sick? Let him call for the elders of the church and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil. Anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith will save the sick. The Lord will raise him up. And if he's committed sins, he will be forgiven. Confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another. That's not what we were thinking, just having a confession thing downstairs. But this part, the effective, fervent prayer of a righteous man avails much. Elijah was a man with a nature like ours, and he prayed earnestly that it would not rain, and it did not rain on the land for 3 years and 6 months. And he prayed again, and the heavens gave rain, and the earth produced its fruit. So we just want to have a place available so that you can come and say there's something that either you're going through or something you would like prayer for. But I want you to know that it isn't just going to be prayer. We also have included blessings for you, just to bless you. I've taken some of those from the Family Blessing by Terry Bone, and Terry and Melissa Bone, they have a table out in the table room, is that called, resource room? And so there'll be blessings. We're just going to pronounce blessings. So if you want to come down and just have a blessing, that's good too. There are different ones that will be in the prayer room. And so there's different times, and you'll see on your agenda when the prayer room is open, and you're welcome to come down. It's at the bottom of the stairs, and you'll see it says prayer room on there. So you're all welcome to come. Did I forget anything?